Hi, everyone. You're listening to the Silvates podcast. So, on the podcast today, I've got Declan McCallion. And now, why I'm really interested and excited to speak to Declan is because he reviews and reads quite a bit, but he specifically reads LGBT and reviews LGBTQ plus literature. Now, growing up, that was something that I was really interested in. And so I have a bunch of questions for Declan about the genre and how it relates to a lot of people nowadays and what that looks like sort of going forward. So thank you so much for joining me, Declan.
Yeah, no problem at all. Happy to be here.
So the way I found you was through TikTok, really. I started seeing your videos on my For You page, and I thought, wow, this guy reads a lot. But also you read such varied and interesting books. What sort of got you, how did you draw into the TikTok sort of thing?
It was sort of random decision one day I just made. I do read a lot, and I read a lot of um not just sort of LGBT fiction, but like a lot of fantasy and a lot of different things as well. But nobody else in my life really reads. So um it was a good opportunity for me to just sort of voice my opinions to whatever strangers on the internet wanted to chime in and listen to. So it just started from there, and now it's just gotten so much more bigger than I thought it would. And yeah, I'm just really glad that there's lots of people that I can sort of rant at.
It almost feels like a virtual book club in a way, because every time you recommend a book, or most books, I tend to look the book up and be like, well, have I read
Yeah,
that one? And it does feel like you've created this community on TikTok, really.
yeah, it's nice to have um, you know, discussions with people in which you're able to discuss the same sort of book, your own feelings about it. Um, it's funny, so many of the emotions and characters and events that happen in books, like there's such commonality in how you experience them with other people, and then being able to share that, it's just really satisfying, and it also lets you sort of think about and explore a little bit more about what you read, like the characters, the themes, the plot. Um, and you can pick apart little things you never really noticed before whenever you're discussing it with people that have read it as well. And it's so interesting that people can come from so many different backgrounds and get different perspectives on the same material, which is what I always find to be the most interesting thing. That's why when I say, like, if I give a negative review of a book and you contradict it, I actually love that because you're going to give me a completely different perspective on how I read it. And I just like the thought process behind that, that you can, just from a different perspective, give such a different view of whatever you read compared to what I read. And yeah, it's just really interesting.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier that, you didn't have a lot of people reading around you. Where did that sort of love for reading come from?
Um, my parents would have encouraged me to read, but my dad would have maybe been the bigger reader. He would have been reading like The Wheel of Time and like really big fantasy books like that. And so I would have gotten a lot of sort of my fantasy orientated reading from him, and he would have took us to the library and stuff like that there. But yeah, apart from that, then I just sort of picked it up on my own whenever I was more of a teenager. I would have been reading um, a lot of YA, a lot of things like The Hunger Games, and I was a big fan of the Spooks books by Joseph Delaney. I still have them on my shelf, and I was obsessed with The Ranger's Apprentice as well. I think I was John Flanagan. I love those books, and yeah, I just really fell in love with them. I was actually more YA fantasy that I was sort of growing up around reading and really, really enjoying, and that sort of just led a bit further on whenever I sort of grew up a bit more to branching out in genre, let's say.
It's me of in a similar way. My mum was always the big reader, and she would literally finish books in days, and it would take me weeks. And I remember her taking me to the library because she's like, "I'm not buying you any more books. Like, just borrow them from the library."
Yeah.
How important was like not just like a school library or like a community library? How important were those sort of facilities for you growing up?
Oh, they were essential. I mean, it would have been a lot more difficult for me to be able to be exposed to any kind of literature if I constantly had to buy it. I mean, I don't know about you, but whenever I was 12, 13 years old, I wasn't running around with hundreds of pounds in pocket money. And I couldn't just get whatever I asked for. So, it was important to be able to go to libraries, and especially the school library was invaluable for me. That's where most of my reading was done. And I actually spent quite a lot of time in there when I was in school and really enjoyed it for that. And just having it as a space I could sort of retreat to and just relax. So yeah, they're invaluable spaces. And they do offer a lot to kids. I just don't think people realize that they're such an important resource until they're gone.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you ever have those? I don't know. I think they're called scholastic events at school, where they would have.
Yes,
Those are
that's
like my favorite days.
that's where I got my first collection of Hunger Games books was from a scholastic fair. I seen them. I'd come in. My mom had given me my lunch money for the week. I had it in my hand, and I was looking at the books, and I thought, hmm, I think I'll get the books instead. And
You
then,
can eat
yeah,
later,
you can eat letter. Yeah, you can just consume the words on the page.
and you were keeping true to the Hunger Games franchise.
Exactly. Yeah, I was trying to relate to the characters by starving myself in school instead.
Oh god, that's gonna go viral for all the wrong reasons. So, what specifically inspired you to sort of create content around LGBT sort of plus books on TikTok?
um, they're the ones I enjoy the most. Is the short answer to it. Like I did a lot more reviews on sort of fantasy books, even some like philosophy books and things like that there. And I never really enjoyed doing them as much as I enjoy doing the LGBT ones because there's a fun sort of element to them. Because the ones I read are typically really spicy and they're centered around usually like a gay romance and stuff like that. Or they're like fantasy books that have a heavily sort of present romantic gay element to them. And so, yeah, I think they're the ones I relate to the most as well because I can see so much of myself in them. So it's always more fun to talk about the experiences because I feel like I can speak from a bit more authority, if that makes sense, because I'm gay. I've been there, I've experienced it, and yeah, it's just something that's a bit more fun for me to read, I think, and fun for me to review as well. And it's nice to have a niche, so it is. Makes it sort of easier to compare books as well that you're reading, especially whenever you're comparing like for like, which is pretty common with a lot of LGBT books.
Definitely. I suppose specific to TikTok, how has the response been on TikTok to the content that you've been making?
Really, really positive. There's a lot of people that really love to engage and will reach out to me personally and like, oh my God, I love your reviews. Like I always look forward to the ones that you send out, and that's always really sweet to me. And yeah, I just think the response from people has been really, really great. And it's nice to gauge their opinions as well of what um, they thought of a book that I've read, or if it's something that they enjoyed, or they'll typically come back to videos and be like, "Oh my God, I just finished the book you recommended, and it was so good." And then you kind of want to have that be like, "Oh my God, did you read this part, and did you enjoy that part?" And oh, so yeah, there's lots of really fun discussions you can have with people as a result of that, and I think that's sort of my favorite element of it.
Yeah, have you ever had a situation where somebody's recommended a book to you on your comments?
I actually deliberately ask people for recommendations. I started sort of like a series where I asked people to give me their recommendations for authors that are very underrepresented or are new, or who don't get a lot of exposure at all. So people that only have had their books bought or read a few hundred times. I like to ask for those recommendations because that's where you get your gems. Some of the best books that I've read in the past year have been from those videos from me going, guys, is there anyone that is completely flying under the radar here that we need to be reading? And when I do get the suggestions, they're usually amazing. And I'm always blown away because some of them will be like the first books that these people publish and they're writing like they've been doing it for 20 years. And I love that. It feels like you're discovering something that nobody knows about. So you can go back then when they get really famous and you can be like, well, I liked them first.
Yeah, gives you street cred.
Exactly, the street cred.
Now I'm showing my age. But and I suppose I'm wondering like how supportive a space has sort of like TikTok and Book Talk specifically been, specifically around sort of LGBTQ plus voices and stories pertaining to them.
Generally, it's very, very positive. I feel like with book talk, all you can really disagree with is your opinions on a book. People can get lots of different reads from it, and as long as you're willing to be open and sensible about discussions with people, um, it's usually not that serious. I think people do get very sort of heated about certain discussions, and I think things just sometimes get away from them, and they end up taking it a lot more seriously than it needs to be. But generally speaking, no, it is a positive space, and it is a space where you get to share these stories that are typically talking about underrepresented elements of society and people, and lots of very specific issues to LGBT people as well. And yeah, I think it's very important that those stories are told and they're able to be discussed in a sort of safe environment where there's no real judgment. It's more just discussing about who felt a character was hotter than the other, or it could be something as simple as that, or something a lot more serious about how an author has depicted a certain struggle that LGBT people go through. And yeah, there's lots of positive elements to it. Obviously, you're going to have people that have a negative spin to it. You're going to get that anywhere in any part of society and any topic. But generally speaking, it is a very, very positive thing.
Yeah, and something you said struck me because I don't think, I mean, pre TikTok, there were obviously like online spaces like Instagram and stuff like that, but I don't feel like like a book talk kind of surgeons happened anywhere else but TikTok.
No, I would say that's 100% true, yeah, because there is a YouTuber, because I would have been I still am a big YouTube person. There is a YouTuber who talks about how books will relate to film adaptations, and I was obsessed with him, and I can't even remember his name now, and it's terrible. But he would basically do these reviews and of books and compare them to the sort of remakes or the film or TV adaptations of them. And on Book Talk, that would be it would be such a thing that people want to discuss, and it's quite popular, and it gets lots of engagement. But with him, he flew under the radar for so many years, and I can see now that his popularity rises a wee bit, and I think that's because of the book talk element has become a bit more solidified. It's a bit more of a community, and people talk about their likes and interests within it a lot more. So I think, yeah, TikTok has definitely lent itself better, but there was elements of it on YouTube. It's just no one seemed very interested at the time, but that seems to have picked up a wee bit now.
Yeah, and I suppose it's a lot easier to have one video go viral on TikTok as opposed to YouTube, where you're really fighting against an algorithm.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think as well, YouTube videos typically take a much greater deal of effort. I can say that because I've tried doing both and I had to immediately give up YouTube because I have a job and I have school and I'm just like, I can't do that. I can't do all of that. So I, uh, I had to step away from it. But yeah, the effort of doing long, sort of not even long, just like 10 minute, 10 to 15 minute long videos, editing it through an editing app then or program and then trying to fix sound and everything else. There's so much that goes into it. And if I had time, maybe I would do that. But yeah, TikTok is a much more easily consumable and or easier to put content out on, if that makes sense. You can do it in a bit of a shorter format that requires less effort behind the scenes, I think.
Yeah, and just the way they're consumed is a lot quicker, so the content can be produced a lot quicker as well. Trust me,
Yeah,
as someone who's doing YouTube and TikTok and all the other ones, it's a slow burn, and it's there's a lot
yeah.
of editing and it can be tricky. But I wonder if you've noticed any sort of viral trends on TikTok that you've noticed, or
I think a lot of, I don't know, internet specific humor is just something that goes viral on TikTok so easily. And I only ever noticed it's like internet specific because my boyfriend does not use social media at all. He doesn't get this stuff. And so I'll be showing him these videos that I honestly think are completely hilarious. And then I'm showing him and he's like, I don't get it. What does that mean? What is that? Or you'll have to do like the mum pause where it's like, hold on, I'm gonna take my glasses out and read what's POV? What's that mean? It's like it's yeah, I think those are the videos that go viral the most because it's so specific to TikTok and it's so specific to the way that the algorithm has our brains wired to it at this point. That they are typically the videos I see go viral or just the internet specific humor, I think.
Yeah, it's almost this subculture, and I guess I'm thinking of if I'm thinking of like any LGBTQ books, like when I first noticed things getting real traction in a really quick way was in, I think, was it last summer or the summer before, when Red, White, and Royal Blue was released, and
Yes.
it just flew on TikTok.
Yeah. I think Red, White, and Royal Blue is while it is a queer specific story, the structure of it, it reads like just a fun romance, but it's gay. And that works. It's like no studio executive or um, publishing company thought to themselves, well, what if we just add a gay element to it? Is it not just going to be just as entertaining, only we're going to get a whole different audience with it? And then someone did it and they were shocked. They were like, oh my God, this is so popular. Why is it so popular? And it's like, well, because the format is popular to begin with, because romance is popular. So what made you think that it wouldn't be popular with this group of people? So yeah, I'm really glad it went viral. I read Red, White, and Royal Blue before it came out. It was actually one of the very first just sort of pure romance books I read, and I loved it. Thought it was so funny and so entertaining, and I was really glad that of all the properties to get picked, it seemed like a sort of perfect start because it's so digestible, it's so easily consumed, and it's just really, really entertaining, especially to read as well. So yeah, I wasn't surprised it went viral the way it did because I think there is a need and a want for it, and it just basically met people's needs.
Yeah, and I think what struck me was it wasn't just, gay males reading it. It was female identifying people reading it. It was straight people reading it. It wasn't just catered. I mean, I suppose the story is catered for a specific demographic, but it had such a wide appeal. Like you said, it was a romance movie essentially, or romance book rather,
Yeah.
initially, and I think that's what really struck people.
hmm Yeah, definitely. I think I think romance at the minute, if you look at the cinema, it's not done all that often anymore. It's so hard for like just a pure romance film, regardless of if it's LGBTQ plus or um sort of just heterosexual romance. They just don't seem to be made that often anymore, and I don't really understand that because there seems to be such a market for it. So yeah, I'm hoping that it's a sign that studios and companies are going to take a bigger chance on stories like that there because they do turn out to be very popular. And yeah, I just think it's a good opportunity to sort of get a sort of gay perspective out there for people to see a bit more often, normalize it a bit more, and be able to see their lives on the screen.
Yeah, and I suppose I'm wondering what your opinions are about. So, for example, we take Red, White, and Royal Blue. It was written
hmm
by Casey McQuiston, who's a female, you know, and she
hmm
actually makes a cameo in the movie as well. Um, but what's your opinion on sort of females writing for a gay male audience? Have you noticed if there's a difference between sort of, a gay man writing those types of stories?
hmm It's such an interesting topic because it does come up quite a bit, and I've noticed if there is ever to be a toxic element within the sort of LGBT side of book talk, it's around this discussion. Should, heterosexual women be writing, gay love stories? And for me personally, yeah, of course they can. That would be like me turning around and saying a gay person can't write a straight love story and publish it. I mean, all that really matters to me is, are you doing justice to their stories? Are you doing justice to the history behind it? Are you doing justice to the pain and the hurt and the experiences that are specific to LGBT plus people? And if you're doing that and you're doing it well, by all means, keep it coming. And But I would still encourage gay male authors for gay male stories to write. You know, write your stories. You know, write your books. If you want to speak, or if you feel like your experience is not being reflected accurately, then start writing, because that's the only way you're gonna, get squeezed into the market that way. And I always do ask for recommendations for books by uh, sort of queer male authors writing gay fiction. And there are some really, really talented guys out there that are very, very popular. I would say Tal Bauer is, God, that man is so talented. It's ridiculous. There's never a story that I've read or that I've read that I've gone, it wasn't his best, or oh, that wasn't great. Like, oh my God, how are you doing this? So yeah, they're out there. I don't think you need to tear one group down to lift up the other. I don't really believe in that, and I think society likes to do that a lot. And I think it's very common in LGBT plus spaces to try to do that, where you try to tear down elements to lift yourself up a little bit. I think you get enough of that from the outside. You don't need to be doing it to yourselves. So yeah, I think in terms of that discussion, I'm happy to keep reading any fiction written by anybody, as long as they're doing those stories justice and they're doing it well.
Yeah, I suppose the more content, and I suppose the more money they derive from it, the more they'll produce, and
That's it.
if they
It can't be bad to get more exposure for ourselves out there, because that is the only way you're really going to change society's perception of you, is just to embed it in their life. It's just a thing. It's no longer a thing to be questioned. It's just part of life. That's just that would be my goal in life, is just to have that be a thing where nobody does need to come out. You show up with your boyfriend, nobody questions it. Your dad give them the grilling, don't hurt my son. And that that should be the universal experience. But you need normalization for that. You need time, and you need people to be exposed to your life in a way that is, you know, it's going to make yourself sort of approachable in a sense, and accessible. Because I think honestly, ignorance is where most of fear and negativity and hatred comes from. And I think just having yourself represented and shown out there is enough to alleviate that ignorance. And with that gone, the other things should follow as well in an ideal society.
ideally, yeah, I agree. And I suppose I'm thinking about then what makes a sort of book, or what represents an authentic queer experience in the book then.
Hmm. I think it's acknowledging the amount of struggle that there is in living your life as a gay person. Um, I think doing those experiences justice, or even just showing how they influence in the way that you write your characters and the way your story unfolds. Um, I mean, no gay person I know has ever told me that, oh yeah, my life has been perfectly amazing and nothing has ever bad happened to me as a result of my sexual identity. Um, and yeah, I think acknowledging that and paying credence to that is a big important element of writing LGBT fiction. Um, I think it is important that those elements are part of characters and that they're acknowledged. Um, so yeah, that pretty much be my general thoughts on it.
Yeah, and I suppose it's having that sort of that authenticity to the struggle. And I'm wondering, because there are certain books that will do that and have done that really well. Young Mungo is coming to mind, for example. It was so beautifully written, but also you could see the strife and the struggle in it. But I find that I gravitate towards books that are a little more lighter,
Yeah,
that are a bit more fun, for a lack of a better word, in
yeah,
that we get the struggle, we identify with it in a
hmm
way that is a almost universal experience. But I also just want to not tap into that sometimes.
yeah. I think a lot of that's to do with entering that negative headspace. Um, they are very important stories to be told, and it is important that we do tell them that they're depicted in books, they're depicted on the screen, and that you hold a mirror up to the world and show, like, listen, this is what you do, this is what you did as a result of your attitudes towards us. But it doesn't need to be everything. Ultimately, what we're aiming here is love. That is the motivation, to be able to love your partner and be with them without discrimination or without fear or retaliation. And love is supposed to be light, it's supposed to be fun, and it's supposed to be all these other things as well. It's not just all darkness and overcoming obstacles. And I think there has been such a focus on the darker elements of what it's like to be a member of the LGBT plus community, that the love and the fun and the excitement and all the great things about being gay are kind of sort of set off to the side, and no one gets to look at them or observe them a lot. And I think that's where sort of the popularity of something like Heartstopper, like when that came out, that exploded everywhere. But I think the reason it exploded everywhere is because it is at its core just a love story between two guys falling in love. And for some reason, no one thought to do that before. No one thought to do just a very sweet, heart melting depiction of a gay relationship between two young guys growing up in school, discovering themselves. And they're not like drug takers, they're not overly sexualized, there is nothing too unapproachable about it at all, and it's very authentic. It feels like the kind of relationship that you would strive for and you would want, and the kind of early romantic relationship that you would have loved to have had. So get what you grabbed.
Yeah, because I suppose in a way, and I know a lot of people identify with that type of aspirational story and how important that would have been for them at that age in a way. And
Mm-hmm.
there's this whole generation of gay men who've never experienced that in that way.
Yeah, I think that is the emotion that a lot of, I think, gay men specifically, to do with that story. There was a general feeling of grief having watched it. Like whenever you finished it and you've seen the two guys get together in the end, and they've had this really beautiful first love start, there is like a grief that follows it. There is a sadness because that time in your life is gone. You can't reclaim that, and you're never going to have that experience. You were robbed of it because of the way that society viewed you and the way that you were treated. And there was a grieving period that you didn't realize you needed for those lost experiences. And only when it was put in front of you then were you like, oh, wow, I'm never going to get that. I mean, you can be glad that the kids are going to get it and that we created an environment where they can have it, which is amazing. But for yourself, you're still going to feel that loss. And, that's fine. Just don't let it sort of consume you or to make yourself feel like you'll never recover from that experiences, because you will. And yeah, it's just a very difficult thing, but it's just a fact of life.
Yeah, I really like that you tapped into that loss and that grief, because I feel that's a generational thing where even generations before us who were fighting for sort of homosexuality not to be on the DSM and not to be criminalized and all that. So I
Mhm.
feel like there are these milestones almost, or these hallmark moments where, a generation before you wouldn't have experienced that or wouldn't have had any of those privileges or rights even. And so there is
Mhm.
this sense of loss or grief, but this appreciation in a way that gets to be carried, that stops there and it gets to be carried over in a different way.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I think creating um, these stories in which you can explore those sort of things that you never did before. The idea of having stories where it's just about two people falling in love and there aren't those societal obstacles in their way, where they can just sort of explore the love of the story rather than um, anything that is directly hostile towards them just out of sexuality alone. Obviously, no matter what, talk to anybody in any relationship, you're going to have obstacles that are, you know, that's regardless of your sexuality, but those are all shared human experiences that we all go through, and there shouldn't be specific struggles for specific types of people and specific relationships. especially not ones that are put there as like a societal barrier. So yeah, I think that's just my general thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I guess it's just general storytelling. There's going to be some type of conflict within a story in order to
Oh, of course.
elevate it. So I suppose having those conflicts not having to be gay or lesbian or LGBT specific, but just universally driven, just seems
Hmm.
a lot more human in a way.
Yeah, it's a shared experience, so it is. I think that makes it sort of more consumable as well for people that aren't LGBT plus. Um, because while that content is out there, like you can find stuff that is very, very specific to yourself and explore your experiences and explore sort of the depths of the emotions that you go through as a result of your experiences as, say, like a gay man. Um, yeah, there's also those stories that don't have to delve into the darkness all the time and that you can just enjoy for the sake of enjoying, just mindless entertainment, which, you should always have available to yourself.
I call it the Emily in Paris effect for books.
Oh, God. My mom loves. No, I think she watched all of it. Yeah, I watched first season and then I just couldn't anymore.
It's fun, it's light, and you hate it, but that's how I look at some of the books in the genre as well. It's you need that type of relief because you can't read,
Yeah,
A
yeah,
Little Life over and over again without it really being triggering in a way.
yeah. There is nothing wrong with fluffy romance. Absolutely nothing. And every sexuality should be able to have their fluffy romance whenever they want to retreat back to, escape into, and just sort of relax and get a little bit of escapism.
Yeah, and you talked a little bit about Heartstopper, and I've mentioned Red, White, and Royal Blue before. What other sort of titles do you feel have had like a powerful impact on queer representation in literature?
Hmm. I think the big one that I would have been aware of would have been Call Me by Your Name. I think when that book came out, it didn't. It was popular, but then when the film adaptation came, then so many people went back and explored the book then, and I think I felt a shift then in my life anyway that the way in which gay relationships were viewed were generally seen as less hostile. I think that story just became a bit approachable for people. It was so emotional and it had so much emotional depth, and it was very much not specific to their issues as a queer couple, you could say. Not until towards the end of the book, but just them allowing a relationship to grow and to develop and to experience these really intense emotions of one another, this attraction. Um, and it's almost like captures a moment in which they are in a time period where they shouldn't really be able to do this. But due to the circumstances of their family, where they are, the location they're at, they're able to just be as a couple and explore this relationship between one another. And then towards the end of the book, reality sets, and then it's the bubbles popped, and like Oliver has to go back to the fiance that he's going to marry, and yeah, I think it's why it's so devastating. It's like when the bubble pops, it's like, oh, this is reality. This is the reality we live in. This is what we could be having. We could be having these really intense, emotional, and rewarding relationships, but we can't because reality's on the outside and it's happening, and it's not going to let you do that. I think that message being in that story, in the book, and in the film, um, I think hit people, and not necessarily LGBT plus people. I think just well, media consumers in general, let's say.
Yeah, and I think one thing that you suddenly tapped into there is when there is a movie adaptation of a queer book, it tends to do better. It tends to blow up. It tends to get notoriety
Mhm.
or popularity. I'm wondering if there are any books that have had an impact for you that haven't been adapted into a movie or a TV show, for example.
Yeah, I read that many. Uh, one I read recently, Oleander by Scarlett Drake. I only read this a few weeks ago, and it's probably my favorite book that I've read in a year. It's a retelling of The Great Expectations, but the two main characters are two gay guys who um, are basically having this on again, off again relationship throughout the youth of their lives. And it was just so beautifully written, and the story so poignant, and the themes surrounding like sexuality and a lot of mental health and abuse as well were delivered in a way that was subtle enough that it wasn't overwhelming for the plot, and you could enjoy the complexities of their relationship while also appreciating that there are darker undertones to the relationship that are a result of um, sort of like generational trauma as well. One of the characters in the show is an uncle um, who is also gay, but following a really negative experience he had with a man. Um, I don't want to spoil the book, but yeah, actions are taken where that trauma is passed on to other family members. And I think that it reflects a lot of the passing down of trauma within the LGBT community as well. Um, and there were so many elements in that book that really struck me, and I was very emotional about the whole thing. And yeah, I just thought it was a wonderful piece of writing that delivered a really interesting perspective on a queer love story. And yeah, I just thought it was great.
Yeah, I haven't read that myself, so that's going on the to be read pile, which
Definitely
is
recommend.
growing ever so longer. I think there was a meme whereby I remember seeing that your to be read pile is a complete separate list to the ones that you actually will and have read.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I did recently like collection of my TBR. Um there was another TikToker, um Dylan something, I can't remember his name now, but he put his TBR on one of those randomizer wheels. And I was like, oh my God, that is genius. Like, that is the smartest way to choose a book I've ever seen in my entire life. So of course I had to do it. And I put everything on a wheel, and I was like, oh my God, there are over 100 books on here. And I was like, this is a joke. This is a mess. And um, I spun it. I'm reading the book now that it chose for me. Um, it's Dark Rise by C.S. Pacat, and it's been on my TBR for ages, and it's finally forced me to read it. The problem is now I want to read the second one, but I also said, oh well, I'll let the wheel choose. So now I'm like, uh, yeah, it's getting away from your TBR is impossible. So it is, because the minute you finish a book, you're just going to find one to replace it. So yeah, I'll just see how this system works out, and I'll take it from there.
Seen another person, probably on TikTok, wrap 12 books and they randomize it, and each month they pick one book out from the pile because it's wrapped. They don't know what they're going to read,
Oh, that's a great idea.
which I thought
That's
was
such a
quite.
good idea.
Something tells me you read more than 12 books a year, but for the mere mortals of us who aren't
Just,
as
just maybe.
prolific, um, I'm wondering then, like, because I know you have a history and sort of an interest in mental health. I wonder if
Yeah.
there's a book that's really resonated with you in terms of either your mental health journey or the character's mental health journey.
Yeah. It was actually one of the offers that I asked people for. So when I asked for recommendations for sort of underrated authors that just released a book, and it was this author's first book. Her name's Alex Cross, and it's called Echoes of Us. And it explores a relationship between two college students, where one of them is a drug addict. And the way in which she's able to depict a toxic relationship and what it's like to be in a toxic relationship was really, really hard hitting for me. I related to it probably a bit more closely than I really wanted to. But the journey felt so fully realized and so carefully done. And the depiction and what it's like to be with someone and experience something like that, and how it can impact your mental health and your mood, and have such a massive influence on the way that you're living your life. Yeah, it was just delivered in such a really, really well done way. It's the best way I can put it. Um, and yeah, it's not just about the bad as well. It's also about redemption and what recovery looks like and how much it takes for a person to get themselves out of that and to get themselves out of a relationship like that. Um, I'm a big believer that there is a certain point that people hit where you can't really continue being with them anymore. You can't help them sort of recover in a way that is healthy for you and them while staying in a relationship with them. It's just not, it's going to ruin both of you rather than, um, the person that's really struggling with it. So yeah, there's lots of really intense topics in it, and it's complex, and yet there's still at the core of it a love story that is complicated and complex and messy, but doesn't shy away from the negative aspects of what it's like to be with um, someone that is going through addiction issues and going through really serious problems like that. So yeah, if you've not read Echoes of Us by Alex Croft, definitely pick it up. It is such a rewarding book to read, and the way that it's laid out, as like a before and after, before when they were in a relationship and afterwards whenever they broke up and are trying to find a way of recovering, not just in terms of recovery of the addiction, but recovery of the relationship. It's just done brilliantly. It's really, really clever and blew me out of the water completely.
And really interestingly, that reminds me of a book I read that really depicts that sort of mental health aspect. It's called The Foghorn Echoes by
Mm-hmm.
Danny Ramadan. And there's aspects of addiction in it, but it's at the core of it, it's this story about these refugees from Syria, and what that entails, and it goes really deep into it, and it pulls out. But I think for me, it was really important to also read stories of from a a POC or a person of color
Mm-hmm.
perspective as
Yeah.
well, and I think that was a book that for me did that really really well. So much so I
Yeah.
keep giving it to people as gifts now. Um, But I'm interested in sort of understanding. So, in your experience, then, sort of how do LGBTQ plus books help readers, feel seen and feel validated, especially navigating around sort of mental health struggles. What kind of stories have really resonated, and how do they do that for you?
I think a lot of it is acknowledging how those experiences and how those struggles are influencing their current character. A lot of the time, books are going to be pretty boring if you start with characters who are completely perfect and have never had any issues and are wonderful and spectacular. They typically make very boring characters. So whenever you're introducing flaws into them and you're giving them struggles and journeys to overcome, paying credence to how LGBT specific issues sort of appear and influence that sort of journey towards trying to achieve a better version of yourself, which is typically what these stories are for. Um, yeah, they can be delivered in really, really poignant ways that are very, very digestible. There's so many books that really do it well, where you do have characters overcome mental health struggles. One I read recently, it's completely left my mind. My memory is terrible.
So,
Um,
if I can interject there, one that you recommended, which I picked up, was The Charm Offensive.
yes, yes,
So
the
they
Charm
do a
Offensive.
really good job about sort of. I think one of the characters has OCD.
Yes, he's very severe OCD. Yes, and the other character has clinical depression. And watching how they sort of are trying to juggle the exploration of their sexuality with these mental health struggles and how they're actually sort of interconnected a little bit. One of the main characters, OCD, it's only being exacerbated as badly as it is because he's being so incongruent with himself. He is trying to live his life in a way that just completely contradicts his nature and how he is, and contradicts as well the way in which his disease wants him to behave. And in that, it's tied in so closely with his sexuality because at his core, he wants to pursue a relationship with a man, but he is trying to improve his image to a point now where it's causing his OCD to go into overdrive. And yeah, it's very, very interesting watching his journey, but also the other side of the love interest, the other guy, he's his clinical depression seems to set in the greatest whenever his sort of self-image is challenged. And his self-image is all about um heteronormative perfect relationship being depicted in this TV show. You tie his identity so closely to it that whenever it's challenged, it completely ruins his perception of reality itself. And so he goes into this really intense depressive state, and he's ashamed to ask for help whenever he's within it, and he's in complete denial. And watching how such opposing um, sort of personalities, because they're also so different, interact with each other and how their mental illnesses interact with each other is just really, really interesting. And so much is tied up in the way in which they view relationships and they view healthy relationships. And yeah, I think the moral of the story is to try to be as true to yourself as you can be, uh, and embrace your flaws, but don't let them sort of rule your life.
Yeah, and I mean, it sounds super depressing when we talk about it, but it's actually a
Oh
fun,
yeah, it's such a
light-hearted book.
funny book.
It's really well written. And bonus points, if you want to think about it that way, one of the main characters is of South Asian descent, so I saw a lot of me in that character, and I
Oh
was like,
yes,
oh,
yes.
that was really affirming to
Hmm.
read.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm wondering like what the intersection between sort of mental health narratives and sort of LGBTQ plus stories there are in the book world, because as we've mentioned a couple, and I think when people think mental health, they think about really dark and really, really heavy stuff. But there is this intersectionality where there is the lighter aspect of it, and I'm wondering what your thoughts around that are.
Yeah, it's so much of mental health and certain mental health conditions, things like that there. Um, they are depicted in their most intense circumstance a lot of the time. Um, but in reality, LGBT people specifically as well, just because of the nature of the way they had to grow up and the way that they are viewed by society in general, um, deal with a certain element of mental health issues, um, just throughout their day-to-day lives. It can be someone as simple as having really bad social anxiety or having sort of image issues, self-worth issues. Um, I think having it reflected in their stories in a way where the characters are aware of it, but they're also sort of making it a part of who they are, and it's just something within them to be accepted and loved. And those are my favorite sort of couples within fiction are the ones where um, their idiocentricities, is that the word? Are
Hmm.
sort of just embraced and loved. And there is a book I just read. It's actually insane. A completely unhealthy depiction of a relationship. So don't be. But there's an element to this couple. It's called God of Fury by Rena Kent, and it's about a mafia boss's son and a very wealthy family's son. And one of them does not care. The mafia son does not care about what anyone thinks of him. He is fully himself, and he only doesn't like. Um, he just doesn't care what people think of him, and he's such a confident, flirtatious, fun character. Everyone loves him. Um, and then you have the other side to it, which is a character who is dealing with really severe trauma and really intense self-image issues to the point where he is actually self-harming because he has such self-loathing for himself that the only way he feels he can release that really intense pressure and hate is by self-harming. And all this relates back to the way that he tries to organize his life. He clearly has some form of OCD, but the way in which the other character views him, it's like that's just part of the personality that I love about you. I love that you're so organized. You got everything thought down to an absolute T. That you are obsessive about this kind of things, and he loves it. That's an aspect of his personality, and he really embraces it. The thing he doesn't want to embrace is the self-harm, the self-hatred. That is something that he views in him as, you need to be leaning on me in those moments. You need to be taking my support whenever that happens, so that I can be with you in those moments and help you through them. And the way in which that was depicted, I was just like, well, I'll have my heart then, fine, whatever. It was such a lovely way in which their characters interact with one another. And yeah, I think so many view a lot of mental health conditions as weaknesses, and a lot of the times that's not the case. Like if you are someone that has OCD in any way, you're also some of the most organized, put together people that I currently know. If you have ADHD, you might be disorganized, but you're also usually some of the most creative people that you'll ever meet as well. And there's positive and benefits with all of it. It's just being careful of the severity of your condition, and I think it's depicted particularly well in a lot of different books. Um, the first M romance book I properly read was called Boyfriend Goals by Riley Hart, and it depicts one character who owns a tattoo parlor, and the other character has recently inherited a bookshop from his estranged grandmother. That character actually has autism, and you're getting a depiction of autism through his point of view as well, the way his mind works, the way he sort of views things. And the other character loves it. He loves his little quirks. He loves the way in which he behaves, his personality. Like, he is fully on board for the full package, and he doesn't do it as like, I love you despite this. I love you because of this. This is all for me. This is really, really great. And I really loved that story because it not just depicted that relationship in such a fun, healthy way, but it also showed that, you know, you don't always need to be limited by these things. You can embrace them as being part of who you are. And yeah, I think that's just my general thoughts. Sorry, I spoke a lot there.
Yeah. And this is how you know it's fiction, because where are these men? Like, as the person with the quirks, where are
Oh,
they?
don't get me started.
Like, I have lots of
Yeah,
rules about lots of different things, and it's quirky in the beginning, and then it gets really annoying afterwards.
that's it. It's learning to sort of appreciate people for who they are at their core, um, and not obsessing over the annoying things. Like, people find the most random things annoying, so don't take it too personally or overly focus on it too much.
So one of the things that I wanted to do is get into is to read more consistently. And
Mhm.
so I flip between actual books and audiobooks very frequently because I do very long journeys and very long commutes in the car. So I want some recommendations from you. So what book would you recommend if people are just starting reading into an LGBTQ plus sort of genre?
Um, I think Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall is a really, really good intro book because it is quintessential British humor done at its best, and it is so fun. The characters are so tragically um, flawed in the most perfect ways that it's so easy to relate to them. And yeah, I think the humor in the book is great. It's so approachable, and the audiobook is also great. So yeah, if you're looking to get into it, I think that's a good place to start. I wasn't a fan of the sequel, but yeah,
I was
the
going to
first
say
book.
Husband Material. What are your thoughts on that?
I have never had such an intense reaction to reading a sequel to a book ever, and then I had to like stop myself. I'm like, "You're getting way too heated about this. Like, this is fiction." I was doing exactly what I was talking about at the start, where people were just like, "This is too. You're taking this too seriously. You need to relax. You're getting your feelings a little bit too much on this." I was 100% doing that. My feelings were like all over the place. By the end of the book, I was like, "Well, I'm disgusted."
So a sequel I feel really held up was well, the first book was called What If It's Us, and it's by Adam Silvera and Becky Albertalli. I'm probably butchering their names, but the sequel to that was Here's to Us, and I thought that was a really fitting sequel. So as far as sequels go, I would certainly recommend that one.
Nice. I'll add it to my growing DB.
Okay, so I need more book recommendations. What book would you recommend if you just wanted to feel your feelings? You just needed a good cry.
Oh, Oleander by Scarlet Drake. 100%. Like I mentioned before, it is just a really, really intense emotional journey. Your heart will bleed for the main character. The name's escaping me now, but it's just it's just heartbreaking. So it is. It's really, really hard, and the characters go through so much, and their relationship. It's just so tragic. It's so many aspects. You're like, oh my god, this is doomed. This is just not happening. And then as things begin to unfold, then you're like, oh, your heart starts to bleed then. But yeah, really emotionally intense, but incredibly rewarding to read. And you'll find maybe at the end, you'll not be sure how to feel. I think some people like the ending, some people don't. But I think it's more down to a personal preference of how they view relationships and past relationships, um, which I thought was very interesting. There was a big discussion in my comments about whether or not these characters still belong together after everything that had happened within the book. And I thought it was so fascinating because it's not written badly. It's purely down to personal perspective about whether or not you're gonna like the end or not. So I'll not say anything more than that. But yeah,
I feel like that for me was A Little Life. It was just, that was
I've not read that
intense.
book. It scares me.
It does. When people start reading it on public transport, I get a little worried for them. Like, oh, which part are you on? Because I mean, you can cry in public. Sure, there's no shame in that, but it's intense.
Do you really want to be crying on your 5 o'clock commute home?
Exactly. So, this might throw you off. I don't know, but what spicy book would you recommend?
For the Fans by Nyla K. It is going to properly challenge you. I was recommended it, and everyone's like, "Oh, this is like the spiciest book I've read," and I'm like, "It's not really like the main thing I look for in a book." But everyone kept recommending. They're like, "No, no, no, you don't understand. It's not just that. You're like gonna fall in love with these characters." And I was like, "Right, okay, fine, I'll read it." And then I read it, or I didn't read it. I actually listened to it. By the way, the audiobook version is the best way to consume it. Um, yeah, blown away. Oh my god! And it's actually about two um two stepbrothers whose parents get married when they're sort of in their late teens, and they hate one another with a passion. Like they cannot stand one another at all, and they end up at the same college together. But the family starts to encounter financial difficulties where they can't afford the college, and nobody wants to go home because if they go home, they have to start living together again, and they don't want to do that. So they come up with a genius idea. They start an OnlyFans account together. But this is it. The concept is wild, and that was the thing that immediately put me off at first was like that's so like ugh, whatever. But then the way in which it actually unfolds within the book, it's just excellent. It's just done so cleverly, and it's so fun. But yeah, they start doing that, and then they realize that these really intense feelings that they've had towards one another, these feelings of hate, are actually maybe representative of a different emotion that the two of them just don't want to have to acknowledge or have to deal with. And by doing this, it sort of forces them to have to deal with it. So yeah, it's really, really good. So it is.
This is giving me season 3 of White Lotus, but I will give it a go.
Yeah, probably.
And what was the book that really challenged you?
So it's not actually an LGBT plus book. It's actually a sort of psychology semi-fictional book. The Courage to Be Disliked. It is basically a breakdown of how Adlerian psychology works, where it's very much about individual responsibility and accepting that you can't control how people react to you. you can't control their emotions, and you cannot or should not try to predict how they're going to react. And as someone who's a bit of a chronic people pleaser, that was a really important book for me, because I suppose it's learning that not only can you not sort of, or should not try to control how someone reacts to something, or you shouldn't withhold important information from somebody just because you fear their reaction. It's also learning to accept the fact that sometimes you need to embrace a negative reaction that you've been given by somebody, that you can't always control when someone's going to get mad at you or when they're not. Um, I think that's such a important lesson that I can't believe I only learned like a year or two ago. Like, I'm 28 years old, and that what now I'm figuring out that, oh, you can't really control people's reactions, and sometimes you just need to accept that negative things are going to happen from what you do or what you say. And that sort of blew my mind. And yeah, it was delivered in such a clever way as well. It's like a conversation between really this very experienced professor, uh, tutor, college professor, something like that, and um, like a student who shows up and contradicts him all the time and says, "The way you say to live my life is makes no sense," and they're having constant conversations about elements of Adlerian psychology, but it's delivered in a very conversational way that makes it very digestible. So if it is something that you're studying at the minute, Adlerian psychology, it's definitely a worthwhile read. So it is, and it's a nice different perspective from Freud, who just thinks everything is about, having
Sex,
sex with your relatives. Yeah.
pretty much. Um, this has been so fun, and I really enjoyed some of these recommendations because I'm going to be able to. It's going to go on my TBR pile. I'm not going to promise to read them anytime soon. But are there any sort of authors or any books that you're really excited about now?
um, Scarlet Drake and Alex Cross. Those two girls. I'm keeping an eye on them, whatever they're bringing out next. I think Alex Cross just released a new book. I'm going to give that a try. And Scarlet Drake, I'll be going back and reading or listening to her previous works. Yeah, there's lots of great upcoming authors as well. I read a really fun, like sort of dark YA fantasy that has like a gay love interest in it, by Ryan J. Hamshaw, called The Dark Friars. Really, really fun book, and really fun world building and really great ideas. So I'll be keeping an eye out for anything that he brings out as well. I think, yeah, you just sort of spot something in somebody at an early stage whenever they're writing. You're like, I think you're onto something here. I'm gonna just sort of stay tuned here and see what comes up next.
Kind of how I felt back when I was a teenager about Nicholas Sparks, and like how
Oh,
like
you
A
knew.
Walk to Remember and The Notebook and like all of those books came out, and I was
Yeah.
like, do you know what? I probably just outed myself as like a proper like romance sort of like nerd, but that's how I felt back when I was a teenager. Ooh,
Well, she has set the gold standard for like modern romance books, I think.
definitely. And I'm wondering what do you hope for LGBTQ plus literature going forward? What would you like to see?
I'd just like to see it more often in your bookstores. I think it should be very easy to be able to go and pick them up, and they should be accessible to a lot more readers, and people should feel more confident in being able to read them and not feel like they're anything you couldn't read out in a public space. Basically, yeah, I think it would just be nice to have them accessible and to have people be willing to read them without fear of being seen as, oh, I'm reading a gay book. I think that would be really, really nice, because so much of these stories and these characters and these journeys are brilliant, and so many people don't get to read them. And it's such a shame. And yeah, I just really hope that the sort of stigma around any sort of LGBT content that's really come up recently just sort of falls away, because I feel like there's a lot of scrutiny about it now, and it feels almost like we're going backwards in so many different ways. Um, I hope that trend doesn't really continue. I hope that dies an early death, and we just continue, you know, making it where this content's consumable for everybody.
Yeah, and I think that really resonated with me just because as you were saying that, I remember covering my books when I was reading some of those kinds of books, on the bus or on the train, and
Yeah.
there and lesser now, but there was a very much that stigma around it, and not wanting
Hmm.
people to know what you were really reading. I mean, I didn't
Yeah.
do it just with LGBTQ, I did it with Twilight as well. Like, I was not letting people know I was reading that on the bus. Um,
Yeah, my favorite thing to see now is um it's usually when I'm on holidays, I'll see um like a Gare's boyfriend sitting on the sound lounger reading A Court of Court of Thorn and Roses or uh like Mist and Fury, and I'm like, well, that's the second book. You've read that first book as well, and they're just enjoying the literature that they've more than likely just got off their girlfriend. And yeah, I think that's a good start, I think.
that's a good sign.
Yeah.
Um, I could literally talk to you for hours about books, and I think for the sake of the listeners, we won't subject that to them. But if people want to find your videos, find out where you are, where can they find you on socials?
I'm mainly on TikTok, so it's Declan McCallion 17. That's my main profile page. And I'm also on Instagram, though not as often. That's Declan7212. Um, so yeah, it's mainly TikTok, but Instagram's there as well if you want.
I'll put sort of your username handles on in the description box below. But thanks so much for spending an hour talking to me about books. This was fun.
No problem at all. This has been great. I usually
Thanks,
don't get to
Declan.
speak for an hour straight about books.